WBNE.
Hello and welcome to episode 90, all about The Hobbit, chapter 4, Overhill and Underhill, being the 90th part of That's What I'm Tolkien About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. And today I'm joined by Delia of Black Girls Create and their new project, The Nerds Are Typing. Welcome back, Delia.
Ooh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So listeners who are maybe new or have joined since I started the movies, Delia came on for... I was trying to think about this when I reached out to you again to see if I was like, oh, I think she came on for Two Towers. And then I went back and looked and it was actually some point in Return of the King.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why can I not remember like when she and Bayana came on? And it was because it was in like the time of the pandemic when like, though it was in like March to July or just 1 month in my brain, you know?
They're just one real long month. I also couldn't remember when we did it. I was like, was it during quarantine?
I don't know anymore at this point. But yeah, and so Delia is the Hobbit aficionado between her and Bayana, and so Bayana will not be joining us, but she did request if I ever cover the cartoon movies, which yes. I really hope I will be getting to. So yeah, she seemed very passionate about that, so I'll have to get her back on for that.
Absolutely. I think they're a good time, personally, but
oh, they look like a wild trip. I'm so excited.
It's a trip.
So tell me a little bit about your history with The Hobbit and when you when The Hobbit came to you in your life.
Actually, I have a less of a history of The Hobbit, even though I like it more as far as the books are concerned. But we actually, in my school, I think my sophomore year of high school, it was required reading. We all read The Hobbit.
Oh.
But because I already knew, I'm like, I love Lord of the Rings, and, I want to start reading Lord of the Rings and whatever, and I'm the nerd that I am. I asked my teacher, can I get a copy early? So this is before we did the unit. I read the whole thing and was
wow,
super
what a nerd.
Yeah, it was peak. Everybody, I got made fun of, whatever. It was worth it because it was really good. And yeah, I've read it a few times since then. I have not read it nearly as much as Lord of the Rings or like even... Again, we won't spoil anything, but like I watch the Lord of the Rings movies all the time. I do not watch the Hobbit movies all the time.
Yeah, I can see from what I'm hearing and picking up on, I can understand why that's the consensus around the fandom. Yeah. I recently realized that I'm going to have to buy the Hobbit movies when I cover them because like I can't just keep renting it because like I covered the Lord of the Rings movies for 5 months. I can't just keep renting. Hopefully I won't be covering the Hobbit movies for
really
that long.
Expensive.
But like, I'm going to have to buy and own copies of the Hobbit. And I swear to God, if there's a separate extended edition that I also have to buy, I'm not doing that. I'm drawing the line there, maybe.
Is there? Yeah, no, don't do that.
I hope not. Because like,
don't worry about it.
I don't know. That's a problem for future me. It's fine. Today me is here to talk about chapter 4, Overhill and Underhill, which I sort of understand the title of this chapter, but it also is like so vaguely connected to what happens that I was like, what hill?
I didn't understand it either until after I was done reading. I was like, oh, I mean, I guess it's a stretch of a
but
title.
I wouldn't call the mountain that they're on a hill is the thing.
No, it's not.
I will say I am more appreciative that Tolkien's chapter titles in The Hobbit are a lot more like vague and playful, whereas in Lord of the Rings, a lot of times it would like spoil what was happening to the point where in Return of the King, there's a chapter called The Pyre of Denethor. And I was looking ahead at the chapter titles and was like, okay, well, obviously at some point Denethor dies.
Right.
So, so I do at least appreciate that, like, it's vague enough that I don't know what's going to happen and I'm not being spoiled by his own chapter titles.
I feel like it's because, like, it lends to, I feel like and maybe, I don't know if you've gotten this since just, we're only 4 chapters in. I feel like The Hobbit is a lot more, it's got a lot more whimsy. And I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like, yeah, the chapter titles are vaguer and kind of more, maybe playful's not the right word, but as far as Tolkien goes, like more playful than the trilogy.
Yeah, yeah. So this chapter kicks off with our gang. Before I sat down to get my setup going and recording and everything, I was like, I wonder if I can name all of the dwarves just off the top of my head. And I got to 10. And I could not tell you
I was about to say, I can't.
No. Because I was like, okay, well, most of them rhyme, so that's good. I was like, okay, Bomber, Bofer, I think Bilfer, Thorin, obviously, Oin and Gloin, Keely and Philly.
Oh my gosh, where are we? 9?
Dwalin Ballin. That's 10. Oh, Dory is 11. No clue who the other 2 are. Couldn't tell you.
Dwarf 13 and 14.
13 and 14. Anyway, so, oh wait, no, because that's the other thing is I get confused because I'm like, wait, there's
Bilbo Wing's 14. There's 13.
Yeah. Point being, they're all traveling. They are traveling up the mountain, and it makes note that, like, oh, down this way is a very bad path that meets very dangerous things. And it's like, yeah, I know, we went down those paths in Lord of the Rings. Like,
right.
those are the places that we went to in Lord of the Rings. But luckily they know the right way because Elrond and Gandalf kind of teamed up to figure out the best way to go, the safest way to go. And they get up on this mountain, and Bilbo looks off in the distance and sees and is like, I know that my home and my safe little hobbit hole and my chair and my food and everything is over there. And I sure wish I was there and not here.
There's something about that I really felt like resonated with me in these times. I'm like, man, I remember the old times of simple things. And like, I was like, yeah, Bilbo, I get it.
And it mentions that it's funny how it starts off being like, oh, those are dangerous paths over there that they're not going to go down. And then they still are encountering a lot of dangers down this path. And there are all these boulders. The way he wrote this just made me laugh a lot, that are like, as the snow is melting, these boulders are falling down, and it says some of them passed among them, which was lucky, or over their heads, which was alarming. And it's like, yeah, that's an understatement, I think, Tolkien. And once again, Bilbo becomes kind of like wistful, and he's thinking like, oh, down there's summer happening and haymaking is going on. And actually, this feels very, as I'm reading this right now, I'm like, oh, this feels like all of us right now dreaming of a summer where we can have picnics and harvesting and blackberrying,
I would love to go blackberrying right now.
That sounds great, like I would love to have a picnic. So, but we're here, much like Bilbo. Indeed. We're not in that situation. We're in a very different situation. I liked this note that it says, even the good plans of wise wizards like Gandalf and of good friends like Elrond go astray sometimes when you are off on dangerous adventures over the edge of the wild. And Gandalf was a wise enough wizard to know it. And I like that because so far we've just kind of seen Gandalf be very, he's very chaotic so far in The Hobbit. And he's very, like, funny and is a prankster. And we don't really see him be serious or, like, a wise old wizard a lot of the times. So this is kind of the first moment of him recognizing that, like, I can plan, or I guess the narrator recognizing that we can follow and trust Gandalf's guidance all we want, but like even the wisest wizards don't know everything, and right. That's like a very big thing to like reckon with. They encounter a very big thunderstorm. It actually calls it a thunder battle, which I just like that very like not kid friendly, but like kind of like simple. I don't know what word I'm trying to think of, but it's like it's very much like this is a like kind of like a Dr. Seuss-y kind of thing. It's like
very visual, like it's simple but visual.
It's like very much a term that's like geared towards kids and children. Like a thunder battle is how strong and dangerous this thunderstorm is. And they're hiding out under this rock, and they're all getting soaking wet, and they eventually decide to send someone off to look for shelter, and they send Keely and Feely off. And it says in parentheses, when everybody could see that it was absolutely no use sending Bilbo.
Which I appreciate. I'm like, yeah,
it's accurate.
That's not me. That's a you thing.
And it's definitely them realizing, because the last time they decided to send someone off to do something was when they saw the trolls, or they didn't know that they were trolls, but they saw this like light off in the distance. They're like, oh, someone go investigate. Bilbo, you go do that. And then he just made it worse for like everyone, for everyone. And so now they've learned their lesson. They're like, this kid is no burglar. So we're not sending him ahead because he's not going to help us at all. So they send Keely and Feely ahead to look for shelter, and they come back and they're like, hey, did you explore that cave to see if it was safe enough? And they're like, yep. And it makes a note. It says, though everybody knew they could not have been long about it if they had come back. Though everybody knew they had not been long about it, they had come back too quick. So I love that they are all like, okay, there's no way that they had time to fully investigate the cave, but we're all too cold and wet and tired to care. So let's just go.
We're going to just take the risk. They kind of poke their nose around in it for a second, and we're going to trust in that. Despite it's like, again, a lot of times this happens in books where I'm like, these people clearly don't know they're in a novel because obviously.
Yeah. This is going to be super specific, but whatever. This reminded me of when I was I must have been in, high school, or maybe the first couple summers when I was in college, working at my neighborhood pool, and we're like getting close to closing, and the manager was like, hey, can you go check the grill and see if it's clean, because we're gonna do hamburgers this weekend. Can you like go check it and see if it needs to be cleaned? And so I go back and I open it and I was like, this does need to be cleaned, but I know if I say that, we're gonna have to stay longer. So I went back and I told the manager, and he was like, is it really clean? And I was like, no. And he's like, that's okay, let's go. So just that mutual recognition between Keely and Feely lying and being like, yeah, we checked it out, it's fine. And the rest of the dwarves being like, no way you checked it out. We all know you're lying. You know you're lying. Let's just go anyway. So they get there, and the cave is small, and it seems safe enough for the time being. So they all kind of gather together and try and dry off clothes, and slowly they go to sleep. And this was so jarring to read. It says, and that was the last time that they used the ponies, packages, baggages, tools, and paraphernalia that they had brought with them.
Right?
So ominous.
See, I've read this before, and I didn't really remember that line. And even I was like, okay, I know what's about to happen, but gee.
Yeah.
Like, clutch pearls.
And it also kind of feels like where we are right now, with the pandemic, where like we're all having our like 1 year ago like time hop memories show up, and it's like, and that was the last time I went to a bar with my friends. That's
exactly what it is. My phone literally the other day was like 1 year ago today, and it was the last time I ate out, and I was like, wow, oh my gosh, I didn't even know.
Yeah. My 1 year ago memory from today is a tweet. Wait, let me read up the full tweet, because it's just so crazy to look back and be like, wow, in hindsight, we didn't know anything. Health officials didn't know anything.
We knew nothing.
Nothing. I wrote, okay, let's all just calm down about coronavirus. You should really only be concerned if you have a compromised immune system or chronic respiratory problems. And then I put, remembers I have a chronic respiratory problem.
Oh, no.
Guess I'll die.
Oh, man.
Anyway, yeah, but like that's really what we thought back then. It's like, oh, it's no problem. Just, wash your hands.
Yeah, I went to almost a year ago now. My granddad died, not COVID related, but I had to fly back to Texas. And at that time, we were saying, don't use masks. Hospitals need masks. You don't need masks. I flew in an airplane all the way to Texas from DC, no mask. nobody had masks.
I know, it's truly crazy what we were, because like I remember going into a grocery store one of the first couple weekends where like it was kind of starting to get serious, and seeing a couple people wearing masks and like scoffing at them and be like, they think those masks are gonna protect them.
LOL. Look at us now. Look at us now.
Yeah, so all of the dwarves and Gandalf and Bilbo, this is the last time, this is like their last moment of peace on this adventure, which is just so frightening, but it's fine. Okay, Tolkien.
And also such a loss. Like, think of all that supplies. Man.
I know, right?
This is like y'all are listening at home, but like you look at this book and see how much is left, and you're like, oh, so that's the last time they got to use that supplies, and they have all this book to go through.
So I am not the kind of person that, like, let's say I was traveling somewhere and they lost my suitcase. I am not the kind of person who would be, like, relaxed and go with the flow and be like, oh, well, it's okay. I'll just go, I'll go to the whatever local Walmart and get a couple things. Like, no.
I need my things.
Anxiety ridden. I would be panicking, being like, no, but you don't understand. The clothes that I packed emanate a certain vibe that I want to put off for this trip, like, and like Walmart's not going to have a bathing suit top for me that will fit me, because bathing suit tops don't fit me. I spent years trying to find just the right bathing suit, so like this idea of losing everything that you packed just fills me with so much anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. I'm already not built for this kind of story. Like, I would not be in The Hobbit. Like, I know that. But if I was, I would definitely need all my, like, accoutrement to, like, get through the situation. And the second it was all lost, I'd be like, so we're going home now?
No,
right?
I'm going home. I'm done.
That's it.
It's really funny the amount of people. I posted the first Hobbit meme that I made, which was like a very momentous occasion for me. I was like, ooh, new source material for memes. This is fun. And it was about Bilbo. It was like, Gandalf, want to come on this adventure, Bilbo? And it's Phoebe from Friends going, oh, I wish I could, but I don't want to. And the amount of people who are like, oh, that's me. That's me. Like, we all heavily relate to Bilbo in that sense. Yeah.
I wish I could, but I don't want to.
So Bilbo has this very bad dream where, like, there's a crack in the cave and it keeps opening up and he's calling up for help and it's dark and it's very scary, and then he wakes up to find, oh, it's actually happening.
Oops.
That's terrifying. And all of the horses are being, or I guess ponies, are being dragged into the crack. And so he jumps up and screams and creates a big ruckus. And all of these goblins come jumping out of the crack and get the dwarves and Bilbo. And somehow, conveniently, they get separated from Gandalf. Which is the second time this has happened now.
Second time, chapter 4.
And the goblins, it references, it says like, oh, they were pinching them really hard. And at some point it uses the phrase like, Bilbo was very unhappy. And it's just so crazy to think about like how this is like, considering this is more of like a children's book, Tolkien didn't want to make this situation too scary or too intense. And then to see the jump from like the goblins, what the goblins are doing here versus like what we see goblins doing in Lord of the Rings is terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading this and I was like, I love the whimsy, but like it's hard once you've read both, like, because when I read The Hobbit the first time, I hadn't read The Lord of the Rings. Obviously, I'd seen the movies, but, like, I hadn't read I didn't read them till after high school, or right at the end. Anyways, and I remember I was like, this is a lot of whimsy. Like, this is fun to read. But then once you read The Lord of the Rings, like, it's hard to really fully immerse yourself in the whimsy, I think. Like, because you're like, okay, but I know what they really can do. Like, I know what it actually is.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at it more of like, oh, this is just a breath of fresh air. Like everything is so, like the stakes are so much, lower. I don't have to, although I do, someone submitted a question for my Q&A episode before The Hobbit and was like, who do you think will die? And I was like, well, up until now, no one. So now I'm scared. But other than that, I'm like, the stakes are low. We're just going on a treasure hunt. I will say, though, as I'm getting further into this, it's feeling more, not exactly like Brothers Grimm, but I am kind of reminded that, like, it's only until, like, very recently in, like, the 90s and, like, 2000s that, like, quote unquote fairy tales or children's stories are actually appropriate for children, you know? Because, like, when you look back, and even looking back on some Disney films in the 90s, terrifying, like Nightmare Fuel, you know, and like Snow White too, like back in the day.
I mean, they had the Snow White ride it's gone now, but it was Snow White Scary Adventures, like that was the ride at Disney World and maybe Disneyland. I haven't been to Disneyland. Like, stuff's terrifying. We're just gonna scare little children. It's fine. They'll be all right. This
part where, like, they're getting taken by the goblins and the goblins have, like, chained them up and they're, like, hurting them and they're cracking. Terrifying. I think, did I make up? I may have made up this detail that there's like a whip that they're cracking.
Oh, no. Yeah, they're cracking a whip.
Yeah, like, that's terrifying. So, like, I am kind of now realizing that, like, oh, right, back in the day, we would tell children stories about, like, don't go into the woods because that's where the evil witch lives and she'll eat you and you will die and burn in hell if you pick those flowers over there, you know? Like, so, like, that's more the mindset that we're in.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that is definitely more the vibe.
And I'm also kind of realizing that it must have been really similar with, like, how it was for fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender and then going into Legend of Korra is kind of similar to like going from The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings, where Avatar is like, oh, it's just a fun kids show, this is great. And then you watch Legend of Korra and you're like, oh my God, I'm traumatized.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, I mean, I want to spoil Legend of Korra for people, but yeah, it's definitely much more
darker subject material.
Yes, darker subject material. The stuff they do with bending, darker.
Oh my
it's just
God.
Darker.
Man, anyway, so they've all been dragged off by these goblins. It's very terrifying. Not super terrifying, though, because the goblins do sing a song. Don't you worry, folks.
You were worried you weren't going to get your song this chapter, but we do.
We get a song. Clap, snap, the black crack, grip, grab, pinch. So lots of onomatopoeia. I don't know why I just remembered that in 4th grade, that was, like, my favorite word. It was, like, my one flex. I was like, I know how to spell the word onomatopoeia. Anyway. It's not like a nice song, you know?
No.
Like, they're singing, but it's not fun. And then, so they get taken to this room where the, like, goblin leader is. And then we get an even more horrifying detail that I'm just so mad at Tolkien for giving us.
I know, we didn't need it. Go ahead.
He says,
please.
I am afraid that was the last they ever saw of those excellent little ponies, including a jolly, sturdy little white fellow that Elrond had lent to Gandalf since his horse was not suitable for the mountain paths. For goblins eat horses and ponies and donkeys and other much more dreadful things, and they are always hungry. So
I had to close my book at the part for a second. I'm like, why?
I screamed, and I was like, why? Like,
we could have just not seen them again, and we would have filled in the gaps. We didn't need. Then to, like, single out and a particularly jolly one too. Yeah, that one got eaten too. So
yeah. Like, I just feel it deep in my heart because, like, Bill the Pony is one of my favorite characters in Lord of the Rings, you know, and I love me some Shadowfax moments. So, like, getting to know the horses in Lord of the Rings and then coming around to that terrible detail that they ate. So this was where I really started to be like, oh, it's not just like a happy-go-lucky children's story, because back in the day, parents would tell their children the most terrifying things and have no idea that it would traumatize them for life, you know? So this is where I was like, oh, it's kind of Grimm Brothers-esque.
Yeah, it's more of that line of children's stories for sure. Because, like, I don't know, I'm glad I didn't have this read to me as a child. I don't know what I would have done with that as a child.
I can tell you if I ever like if I ever have children and I decide to like read this to them, I'm gonna skip over that part.
You're gonna make some edits.
Yeah, I'm gonna read through it and I'm gonna go in with a Sharpie and I'm gonna black out.
Don't worry about that part. And the thing is, it's not needed.
And then my kids are gonna come to it later and be like in adulthood or like when they're teenagers and be like, oh my god, my mom censored The Hobbit from me. What the heck?
It's necessary. That in particular is rough.
Oh, actually, another Friends reference that I'm remembering is there's one episode where Phoebe realizes that her mom, like, lied about all of the, like, sad stories or movies when they were kids.
Oh.
And, like, because they're watching Old Yeller or something. And she's like, it's okay because he gets better and the end. And they're like, Phoebe, that's not what happens. And so she has to watch all of these movies that her mom would, like, just turn it off and be like, and that's the end. So that's what I'll do with The Hobbit, yeah. And then we get, in case you were worried, guys, don't worry, The Hobbit also has a commentary on industrialization. In case you were worried, I know we were afraid we wouldn't get that in The Hobbit. And it talks about how the goblins they're bad-hearted, wicked, cruel monsters. They're responsible for they make things, but none of the things they make are good. It is not unlikely that they invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them. So apparently goblins made guns.
The military industrial complex is thanks to goblins.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just think, like, as you know, obviously for kids reading this or younger kids reading this, they're not going to be thinking like, oh, Tolkien fought in World War I and experienced horrors he's never seen before, and like coming back from the war when there's this boom in industrialization and machines, you're not thinking about any of that when you're a kid. So like reading this as an adult and knowing all of that background information, I'm like, oh, so obviously, Tolkien is connecting that machinery to the evil creatures in this story. I wonder what Tolkien would think of the iPhone,
Yeah, I wonder, is he, like,
Like, is he pro or, like, would he be against all of the advances in technology we have now,
Because he does differentiate, like, there are good things that can be made. So I'm like, which does that fall under?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about, because, like, I'm sure at the time, like, seeing all of this, like, machinery is very jarring when you've never seen the likes of it before in your life.
Yeah, then mix that with your trauma. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, like, it'd be very easy to be like, oh no, machines are evil. So like, I don't know. I guess he did live into the 70s, so he saw a lot more advancement in technology, but like at the time it was just something you'd just never seen before in your life. So the goblins are like, who are these prisoners? And they're dwarves. He says dwarves and this, pointing at Bilbo. Poor Bilbo. And Thorin tries to like come up with a lie and is like, oh, we were just going to visit our relatives. And the goblin is like, I know all about you, Thorin Oakenshield. Calls him out for being a liar and all this stuff. And they're basically about to, I don't know, be eaten or killed, whatever. But then all the lights go out. Oh wait, no, actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Don't worry about it. They pull out Thorin's shield that he got from the trolls, which is Orcrist the Goblin Cleaver. But the goblins called it simply Biter. They hated it and hated worse anyone that carried it. So Thorin has been carrying this weapon that was used in a war that happened before with goblins and dwarves. And all these goblins recognize this weapon. So like that's just kind of like adding fuel to the fire for this this feud and these preconceived, not even like misconception, because I don't know, I can't exactly blame the goblins. If someone showed up with the weapon that killed all of my friends, I might be mad too.
Yeah, I don't think I'd take kindly to it either. And I think it's funny, up until that point, like Thorin's been like very polite. He's like, oh, Thorin the dwarf, at your service. And I'm like, I think it would be even more off-putting that like that's his sword. Like if he would have come in like mean or whatever, but it's like, oh, you're trying to be like a trickster. You're trying to come in and trick us into thinking that you're this good guy, but actually you're carrying this sword that's killed thousands of my people. No big deal.
And that's kind of like, oh, okay, I guess we can't play it. We can't try and play this off anymore. No. We're in trouble. And then that's when the lights go out.
Dum dum dum.
I'm just like, Gandalf.
You couldn't even live in the mystery for a moment.
Just immediately knew. What did I write down? Yeah, I wrote down, is this another Gandalf ex machina?
And the answer is yeah.
Yeah. So Gandalf bursts in and they can see his sword. It says, suddenly a sword flashed in its own light. And later on it references that like it's glowing blue, I think. So like, does this also have the same powers that we know Sting has in Lord of the Rings?
I think so. And I don't think this is a spoiler. I think in my memory it's not as clear because since this was written first, like there are things that aren't as developed as like later. So I think it is meant to be, but I don't know if like he knew that at the time, if that makes sense.
And he also like doesn't explain it at all. He's not like, oh, well, the sword was glowing and had its own light because it was near enemies or whatever.
Right.
So Gandalf, or of course, I guess we don't know that it's Gandalf, this mysterious person.
Being. He even talks, but we're not sure. Can't be too sure.
Yeah. Bursts in and kills a couple goblins and gets the dwarves and Bilbo out. And then it says, oh, actually, I missed earlier in the chapter when they're like first entering the caves, it mentions that Gandalf lights up his wand. And then it says it again here. And I'm like, wand?
I noted that too. I was like, I don't think I've ever thought about it. But see, this is what I mean where I'm like, I think it's just like one of those things that was less developed at that time he was writing it. Because I'm like, wand, that is a weird word.
Mm-hmm. And it's something so like foreign to our concept of like what we understand Gandalf to be. Like he doesn't like wand is Harry Potter to me,
yeah, like,
you know,
Guardian Leviosa.
You know, I literally wrote that. I think I wrote that down when it first references it. I said, yeah, Gandalf has a wand. You're a wizard. You know, like, which, yeah, he is a wizard, but like it's a totally different, you know, idea in our heads of like what a wizard, of like Gandalf the wizard versus like Harry Potter the wizard. Yeah, so I just thought that was just funny that like, I don't know, maybe some point later in The Hobbit, Gandalf is like, screw this wand, I want a staff. Who knows? Or some point in the, I don't know, 50 or so years between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, he's like, you know what, I'm going to be a proper old man now. I'm going to get a staff.
I need a full-on staff. This wand thing it's making me seem young. I keep getting carded everywhere.
Yeah. It's also just silly to me to picture Gandalf running around and
Hocus pocus bibbity bobbity boo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so it says, then Gandalf lit up his wand. Of course it was Gandalf. And that's just
like, yeah, of course it was.
I just like, I want that, like, I don't know, commemorated on a plaque somewhere, because like that's just in sum his entire character. Of course it was Gandalf.
That's actually, I mean, Gandalf is probably trademarked, but that'd be good merch. Like, of course it was Gandalf.
Of course it was Gandalf. Yeah. And like, that's what's so funny is like, that was also exactly what I was thinking at the time was, of course it was Gandalf.
I really just want to know what Tolkien thought he was doing there. Like, who else would it have been? Like, who else could we have possibly at this point in the story thought it was Elrond just followed them or something? Like,
that could have been fun. Yeah.
I mean, I guess he could have pulled it like Tom Bombadil, like in Fellowship, because like he follows him and is like, I told you not to.
Yeah.
Get got.
Maybe he was, because I had Dr. Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor, on for the first chapter. And he was telling me that when Tolkien was writing The Hobbit, he was largely just kind of making it up as he went along.
That's a foreign concept to me, but.
And so I can see Tolkien like writing this chapter and being like, okay, someone comes in to rescue them, but I'm going to keep it a mystery because maybe it's not Gandalf. Maybe it is a different person. And then maybe he was like writing this scene and was like, no, it has to be Gandalf. Gandalf. Of course it was Gandalf. You know, who else would it be? But then they were too busy to ask how he got there. So I just love that. It's like, no time for that. Run.
Don't worry about it.
And it also reminds us that Gandalf's sword is Glamdring the Foe Hammer. The goblins called it Beater and hated it worse than Biter, if possible. So now adding more fuel to the fire. They have these two weapons that the goblins detest. They're dwarves. They gotta get out of here. Gandalf does stop to take attendance. I think that's funny. I don't know why.
Like a good teacher.
Yeah. It's got like a head count on a field trip.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
1, 2, 3. All right, we're all here. The gang is all here.
All right, on we go. Tally ho, onward. And Dory? No, it's Bomber. Bomber picks up Bilbo, puts him on his back. And I'm just like, again, with the carrying of the hobbits. Just, I don't know, it's always a funny plot device to me.
Yeah.
And Bilbo says, why, oh, why did I ever leave my hobbit hole? And Bomber says, why, oh, why did I ever bring a wretched little hobbit on a treasure hunt?
I mean, it is a thing to say when he's currently carrying you. I was like, yeah, maybe not now, Bilbo. Like, I get it, but...
Yeah. It's just so funny of him being like, yeah, why did you leave?
You've just been dead weight.
Oh, man. Oh, so funny. So they've reached they eventually are caught up with the goblins who've been chasing them. And I'm kind of confused about what happens here, but because something happens where like the goblins turn and run away, I guess because they see that they have Biter and Beater. Mm-hmm. And so they like turn and run away. And then at one point or another, they meet up with the goblins again. I don't know.
I take it as they like turn and run away, but then they're like regrouping. They're like, okay, a head-on attack's not going to work. We're gonna stealth attack.
Yeah, sneak attack. Yeah, they put out their torches and they slipped on soft shoes. I'm assuming they didn't like literally slip on soft shoes, but I think that's just very funny. Like,
I thought that was funny too. I was like, oh, so they like reached into their packs or like, hold on, they got on the ground and like taking off their other shoes and putting on new shoes.
Yeah, they slipped on their soft shoes, and they chose out their very quickest runners with the sharpest eyes and ears. So they turn around to go get them with a sneak attack. And at this point, Bilbo is being carried by Dory. And they do not hear the goblins running up behind them, and Dory gets grabbed. That's it. Dory gets grabbed from behind and he falls, and Bilbo falls off and hits his head and remembered nothing more. So dark. I wonder what's going to happen next. Riddles in the dark. I wonder what happens there. I actually do think I know what happens there. I think it's the only time I'm going to know what happened or what is to come, because I'm pretty sure that's how Bilbo like steals the ring from Gollum. I remember it had something to do with riddles. So we'll see, you know?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, because there is less known about the Hobbit broadly, but you do know some from reading Lord of the Rings because they reference it.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if it was like I think there was like a prologue that kind of introduce this idea of like what are hobbits and like who are these funny people and who is Bilbo, because it is kind of, you know, not necessarily, not that you like need to know like how did Bilbo come to find this ring, but if you're gonna have a whole, you know, this huge book or whatever, or series called Lord of the Rings, and it's all about destroying this one ring, it is kind of helpful, I guess, to know how your main character comes to have that ring and why they have to go destroy it. I still don't, you know, like thinking back on it now, I'm still like, why was it just because Bilbo stole this ring that he didn't know was evil and he left it to Frodo? Like, why is that Frodo's job now, you know? Like, why is it now Frodo's responsibility?
Yeah, it seems it's really bold of the entirety of Middle-earth to be like, Frodo's got it. I mean, that makes sense. Like,
they were like, finders keepers. Sorry.
We played hot potato and you lost. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that brings us to the end of the chapter discussion. Was there something we missed or that I forgot to bring up that you wanted to talk about?
No, not really. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward chapter. I was surprised. Like, I can't remember like the chapter splits. Like, I just remember like the story arcs, which it's good to, if you're ever on her podcast, make sure you read the chapter ahead of time so you don't spoil anything on accident, because I would have had I didn't. So,
Ooh. That would have been fun. People would have come after. No one would have come after.
But yeah, no, we covered it all. It's a pretty simple chapter. Yeah. I mean, except the chapter title. We already talked about that. I was like, Over the Hill, Under Hill it's a stretch of a title, but I know,
like, what else would I have called? Well, and I was also expecting, because read some trivia, or maybe it was like some note or whatever in Lord of the Rings, because Frodo, when they go to Bree and they're at the Prancing Pony, in the book he gives the name Underhill as a pseudonym, or whatever, not pseudonym. Whatever, because they're trying to be stealthy and they suck at being stealthy, but whatever. Right. He gives the name Underhill, and I remember seeing some note about like, oh, that's the name that Bilbo used for blank. And so when I saw this chapter title was called Overhill and Underhill, I was like, oh, maybe like that will come up. No, not at all. No. So no, whatever. Then I will say the other, was it the previous chapter? No, the previous chapter was A Short Rest. That made sense. Mm-hmm. That made sense. The chapter before that, where they have like the thing with the trolls, is called Roast Mutton.
That was present.
I guess. I don't know. I'm also trying, but again, kind of like how like I gave the example with the Pyre of Denethor. I'm trying not to read ahead with the chapter titles, so we'll have to wait and see. Who knows?
I think they're pretty much fine, but yeah, don't, because that's tragic. It is so nice to sit down and be like, oh, okay, I'm recording soon. Let me sit down and read this chapter. And it's like 10 pages. And it's not like a dense 10 pages. No. You know? It's just a very straightforward, short, simple, sweet, bam, bada boom, we're done. Well, not dense if you're not if you're familiar with Tolkien. If you're not, probably still a trek.
True. Yeah. Well, that will bring us to the end of this episode then. Delia, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you on the internet, and what would you like to plug?
Oh, yes. So you can find me at Twitter, mostly at Delia is Typing. We do have a new podcast coming out, but there is an Instagram account for it. You can follow us there at The Nerds Are Typing, and Black Girls Create is at Black Girls Create, BLK Girls Create on Twitter, or blackgirlscreate.org. I'm in all those spots.
You can find her everywhere. Also, I've been her Twitter name right now. What is it? It has something to do with Haley Williams.
Oh, and it's Haley Williams Simp, because
that was it. Yeah, and like every time I went to check our messages, I was like, when did I message Haley? Oh wait, no, this is Delia.
I've actually done it to myself. I'm like, what the heck is? Oh, that's me.
Just made me laugh. And you've had like a couple other very amusing Twitter names in the past, so I just wanted to, I don't know, compliment you.
Deliatic, Brandy Buck.
I forget that like you can change your nickname on Twitter, so I feel like I should do that more often.
I think it's my ADHD. I change it way too often, to be quite honest. Like, it may be different by the time y'all are listening to this, and if that's true, I'm so sorry.
I'm unfollowing this podcast because she said her Twitter name was Haley Williams Simp, and that's not true anymore. Unfollow, unsubscribe, 1-star review. That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WBNE. You can learn more about the network by going to WBNE.org, where you will find all of our shows like Hello from Elsewhere.
Do you find yourself thinking deeply about pop culture?
Do you wish for a super nerdy podcast that explores your favorite movies and books?
Well, look no further. From WBNE, it's Hello from Elsewhere.
On our podcast, we promise to literally transport you to all your favorite fictional settings.
I don't think we can actually promise that.
Yes, we can. Travel with us to the Death Star.
We can't put people in harm's way like that.
Or visit beautiful New Asgard.
That's so many plane tickets to Norway.
Explore the eras of Jane Austen or Frankenstein.
Metaphorically, we don't know how to implement time travel.
We do now on Hello from Elsewhere.
We're going to get in trouble with these promises.
With new episodes every other Friday, Hello from Elsewhere is available wherever you find your podcasts.
Yes, that part is true.
You can even listen on the Hogwarts Express.
Oh boy.
The cover art is by Graphite, aka Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at graphite.vmb. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/talkingaboutpod or by following the link in the episode description. And also, just a little side note, TeePublic does sales all the time, so there's a good chance that if you check the website and there's not a sale happening now, there will be one happening in a couple days or the next week. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod, and you can also join the Facebook group, which is linked in the episode description. You can find me on Twitter at MCWhat'sUp and Instagram at MCTurndownForWhat. You can support the podcast by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod to explore the different tiers and perks. You can join Discord for $3 a month, and we just had a Tolkien About Discord hang last week. When is this coming out? Yeah, a couple days ago, actually. By the time this is coming out, we had a hangout on Discord, and it was a really fun time. And I'll probably be doing more of those in the future. So if you want to be a part of those, join Discord for $3 a month. Or you can become a sponsor like Katie. Katie, thank you so much for your continued long-term support of the podcast. I appreciate it very much. And as always, if you like what you're listening to, please rate and review. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Not really. Just have fun. I love The Hobbit, and it's a great ride. I'm excited to hear your thoughts as you go along.
I know. I'm enjoying it so much. I love the dry humor of it, and
yeah,
I love Bilbo's just whole attitude and the way he's just being dragged along. Oh my gosh,
that should be a conversation for a later date. But yeah, I love Bilbo. I mean, I love Frodo, but Bilbo,
he's
great.
Just a mood.
Yeah, he's a mood, a vibe all the time.
Mood. And that's what I'm talking about.